My name's Cody. I'm from the Jack Pine Tribune, and I'm here today to read The Alligator Baby by Robert Munch. One day, Kristen's mother woke up and yelled, "A baby! I'm having a baby!" Kristen's father jumped up and zoomed around the room, got dressed and grabbed Kristen's mother by the hand. They took off and ran downstairs really fast. Vroom! Unfortunately, they got lost. They didn't go to the hospital. They went to the zoo. But that was okay. They drove home and knocked on the front door. Blam, blam, blam. Kristen opened up the door and there was her mother holding something all wrapped up. "Kristen," she said, "would you like to see your new baby brother?" "Oh yes," replied Kristen. So Kristen lifted up the bottom of the blanket and she saw a long green tail and said, "That's not a people's tail." Kristen lifted up the middle of the blanket and saw a green claw and said, "That's not a people's claw." Kristen lifted up the top of the blanket, saw a long green face with lots of teeth and said, "That's not a people's face. That's not my baby brother." "Now Kristen," said her mother, "don't be jealous." Just then, the baby reached up and bit Kristen's mother on the nose. And her mother yelled, "Ah!" Then the baby reached up and bit her father on the nose. And he went, "Ah!" "That's not a people baby," said Kristen. "That's an alligator baby." "Goodness," said her mother, "we've got the wrong baby." So Kristen put the alligator baby in the fish tank. And her mother and father drove back to the zoo. And they came back an hour and knocked on the door. Blam, blam, blam. Kristen opened up the door and her mother said, "Would you like to see your new baby brother?" "Oh yes," replied Kristen. Kristen lifted up the bottom of the blanket and saw a fishy tail and said, "That's not a people's tail." Then she lifted up the middle of the blanket and saw a flipper and said, "That's not a people's flipper." Kristen lifted up the top of the blanket and saw a face with whiskers and said, "That's not a people's face. And that's not my baby brother." "Now Kristen," her mother replied, "don't be jealous." Just then the baby reached up with his flipper and flapped her father's face. Whap, whap, whap. He yelled, "Oh, it's a seal's baby. We've got the wrong baby again." So Kristen put the seal baby back in the bathtub and her mother and father took off again to the zoo. Again, they came back an hour later, knocked on the door. Blam, blam, blam. They said, "Kristen, would you like to see your new brother?" "Oh yes," replied Kristen. She lifted up the bottom of the blanket and saw a very hairy leg and said, "That's not a people's leg." She lifted up the middle of the blanket and saw a very hairy arm and said, "I don't think that's a person's arm." She lifted up the top of the blanket and saw a very hairy face and said, "That's not a people's face. And again, that's not my brother." Now Kristen replied, her mother, "Don't be jealous." Then the baby reached up with his feet and grabbed her mother's ear and her father's ear at the same time, and they both yelled, "Whoa! It's a gorilla baby! We've got the wrong baby!" "Let me do it," said Kristen. So her mother and father put the gorilla baby on the chandelier in the living room, and Kristen took off on her bike to the zoo. First, Kristen looked at the snake in the cage. No people babies. Then Kristen looked at the wombat cage, and again she couldn't find the baby. And then she went to the elephant cage, and again there was no babies in there. And then she stopped and listened. From far away she heard, "Wah, wah, wah." "That's more like it," said Kristen. She followed the sound. It was coming from the gorilla cage. Kristen looked at the mama gorilla and said, "Give me my baby brother." The gorilla jumped away and wouldn't give up the baby. Then the people baby reached up and bit the gorilla on the nose, and the gorilla yelled, "Whoa!" and handed the baby to Kristen, and Kristen jumped on her bicycle and pedaled home as fast as she could. Kristen knocked on the door. Blam, blam, blam. When her parents opened it, she said, "Would you like to see your new baby?" Kristen's mother lifted up the bottom of the blanket and said, "Look it! People legs!" They lifted up the middle of the blanket, and her mother goes, "Wow, people hands!" She lifted up the top of the blanket and said, "Whoa, a person's face!" Kristen's mother picked up the baby and gave it a big hug. Her father took the baby and gave it a big hug also. And her mother said, "Kristen, Kristen, you got my baby back. Good for you." "But what are we going to do with all these other babies?" yelled Kristen's father. "There's a seal baby in the bathtub, an alligator baby in the fish tank, and a gorilla hanging from the chandelier. We should take them all back to the zoo." But Kristen looked out the window and said, "I don't think we're going to have to worry about anything at all, because here comes all the parents crashing in through the front door." And everything was okay until Kristen's mother had twins.